In this last video, I'm going to cover a couple multiple choice questions that are a little bit different than what we've seen, starting with question number 14, I believe on page 9. Yeah. So Anne has this coin. She doesn't know if it's a fair coin. She flipped it 100 times and obtained 73 heads. And she ran a computer simulation of 200 samples of 100 fair coin flips. So there's 200 dots here. And they've given you the number of samples, the mean, the standard deviation. This shows the results of a fair coin. So that's important to note. Let me make that very clear. These are results from a fair coin. She got 73 heads out of 100 flips. So what we're looking at is what's the likelihood that you get 0.73 or higher. Well, the simulated sampling distribution just goes a little above 0.6. So if we're talking 0.73 or higher, this would be 0 out of 200 or 0%. So they want to know which statement is most accurate. Well, 73 of the computer's next 100 coin flips will be heads. That's a definitive statement. Exactly 73. Well, that never happened here, and it's definitive. No. 50 will be heads. Okay, it happened a certain amount of time, but there's no way we can guarantee it's going to be exactly 50. Her coin is not fair. Her coin is fair. Well, that 0.73 or higher never happened, so it's very unusual to happen on a fair coin. So we have a lot of evidence that her coin is not fair because she got 73 heads out of 100, which never happened in 200 simulations on a fair coin. So let's take a look at 15. Okay, so they're assuming 95% confidence. So they want to do a 95% confidence interval, and they're asking specifically here about the margin of error. Not about the mean, just the margin of error. So it looks like they said assuming 55% of people would vote for that candidate. So the mean is going to be that 0.55 plus or minus 2 times something. Should capture about 95% of the data. So if we pick choice 1, you're going to get 0.53 to 0.57 for your confidence interval. So if we go from about 53 to 57%, that's not 95% of the data. Maybe it's around 80. You still have quite a bit of data out in the two tails. So it looks like that's too small of a margin of error. Choice 2, if we do that same idea, 0.55 plus or minus 2 times 0.03. Now we're looking at 0.49 to 0.61. All right, 0.49 to 0.61. Oh, shoot, I messed up already. Hold up. It says the margin of error. So here's my mistake. Here, they already did the margin of error. So it would just be plus or minus the 0.1. So this should be 0.54 to 0.56. So that's even less of a percentage. That's definitely not 95% if these are even closer. In the second choice, now this is going to be 0.52 to 0.58. Man, I'm glad I made that mistake. All right, so let's erase these because that was from part A. Okay, 0.52 to 0.58. That's a little further out. It looks like it's capturing most of the data, around maybe 95%. All right, let's check choice 3, see if that's any better. When we do that, you're going to be looking at 0.55 plus or minus 0.06, which is going to give you that 0.49 to 0.61. Let me try to get that out of the way. Yeah, okay. So when we do that, 0.49 to 0.61, that's capturing 100% of the data. That's too much. 0.12 is going to be even wider. So the best answer that we have to go off of is choice 2. Is it exactly 95% of the data? No, but it's the best estimate we have for going between the 0.52 and the 0.58. Essentially, we're saying there's about 95% of the data between those two values here at 0.52 all the way out to 0.58. The next section of questions that I would like you to tackle are 16, 18, and 20 to 22 on this lesson. So give that a go, come back, and I will review those when you're done. So question 16 is very similar to 15 that we just covered. They give you the margin of error, and you're trying to figure out which margin of error is going to capture about 95% of the data. So if you take this 1.16 plus or minus this 1%, you're going to get about 15 to 17. Again, that's not capturing 95% of the data. There was a simulation of 100. So there's 100 dots here. So essentially you're looking at capturing about 95. We haven't done that. Margin of error, 2%. So plus or minus 2%. Now you're at essentially 14 to 18. Well, that's 96 out of the 100 dots that you captured here. And then the issue with choice 3 and 4, they're saying the proportion is 0.01 or 0.02, but that's the proportion should be the mean here, which is about 0.16. So choice 2 is your best response for 16. Moving on to 18. Now they want to know which of these results is false. So that's going to be important to just recognize that. There's a lot going on here. They tossed a coin 10 times recording the graph. So again, this is results of a fair coin. This is what happens if this is all a fair coin. So 5 heads occurred most often, which is consistent with the theoretical probability. Yes, out of 10 flips, we'd expect 5 heads on average. That's true. 8 heads is unusual. Well, if we look at 8 or more, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of the 50 is 12%. 12% is not unusual, as that's higher than 5%. So this is false. We'll come back. Obtaining 3 heads or fewer occurred 28% of the time. If we were to count the dots at 3 or less, you are going to get 14 out of 50 or 28%. That's true. 7 heads is not unusual, as it falls within the middle 95%. Also true, because 7 or higher, you're looking at 9 dots out of 50, which happens 18% of the time, which is not unusual. So that's why this is choice 2. Moving on to question 20. All right, so we're looking at these candies. They give you the mean, they give you the standard deviation, and we want to know out of Bonnie's bag what inference or conclusion can be made. She got 24 blue. So if we do a confidence interval, you take the mean plus or minus 2 times the standard deviation, you're going to end up with this 21.4 to 37.1 essentially. Well, 24 is included in that confidence interval, so that's not unusual. That's supporting the company's claim because they said 45% of the candies are blue. So anything here could be 45% with the typical variation. So that's not odd. If you do the 5% rule, 24 or less occurs 12% of the time. Not unusual. So that's why this is choice 4. It's not a rarity because it fell in the confidence interval and it was happening above 5% of the time. If they're not meeting their production standard, then we would say the result was significant. It wasn't in the confidence interval. They should change their claim to 37% are blue. No, just because that this 24 out of 65 is probably where they're coming up with that. That's what occurred in this one bag. We're not going to change the claim based on what happened in one bag. All right, let's move on to 21. More candy questions. Determine the middle 95% of plausible values. So this is essentially saying you need to use a confidence interval. There's not a choice of doing the 5% rule here. So once you do that, let me see what I did here. There we go. So you take your mean plus or minus 2 times your standard deviation, and that's where you're going to get this 0.185 to 0.417. And they want to know now, based off that simulation, is it unusual that her pack had 14 candies, red candies out of 60? So 14 out of 60 is 0.23. 0.23 falls within that confidence interval. So it's a reasonable or a usual value. So the result is not unusual because 0.23 falls within this confidence interval. And the last one, question 22, with Betty. Now we're talking about just the margin of error. So again, what would you need to go out to capture the about 95% of the data? So if we do that 0.01, if we went from like 0.64 to 0.66, because if we take the mean plus or minus 1%, that's not 95% of the data. 0.02, so if we go like 0.63 to 0.67, that's not enough. 0.05, 0.6 to 0.7, still not 95% in here. It's closer. 0.07 is going to be like 0.72 to 0.58. That's going to be about 95% of the data. Yes, you have some in that tail and some in this tail, but that's going to be the best estimate for the margin of error. So at this point, if you have time remaining in class, the expectation is you finish up your blue review sheet. And if that's done, turn it in and leave that with the sub. Make sure your name is on it. If you don't have time to finish that, that blue review sheet is due next class, which will be Friday by the end of the day. If you're done with your blue sheet, you can go back and practice either topic 1, topic 2, or topic 3 extra questions to make sure you're good to go. Next class, we will cover topic 4, and that will be the end of the unit. I hope y'all have a good day. Sorry I was not there today.